Mark Collet is quite possibly the most deplatformed individual in the country. Maybe any country. His dedication to nationalism and his refusal to compromise has cost him bank accounts, it's cost him his reputation, it's cost him his family, it's cost him friends, and it's cost him opportunities. I don't think that anyone has suffered more for upholding their beliefs in this political era than he has. His resolve in the face of adversity is an inspiration to all of us, and with over 20 years of experience in the political sphere, there is very little that can take him by surprise anymore. He is a genuinely good man, and as a father, he has a very real blood investment in the future of this country and its people. I would trust him over anyone in Parliament today. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Collet.
It's often said that nothing ever happens, and then all of a sudden, everything happens all at once. And so much has happened over the last 12 months that I think it's fair to say we are living in a time of unprecedented accelerationism. There has been such a fundamental sea change in the way that normal people think and act. It shocked even me. We are living in a time where every single week, thousands of people up and down this country take to the streets to protest against mass immigration and for the deportation of migrants. This kind of grassroots anti-immigration protest and activism has never been seen before. What's more, the people who are committing themselves to this activity now widely acknowledge we live under a system of two-tier justice. And this acknowledgement is essential for white British people to understand that the system is fundamentally geared against them. This realization is a central part of the racial awakening of our people. White Britons now understand that not only are they becoming a minority, but there is a clear racial or ethnic hierarchy in this country. But most crucially, they understand that they are at the very bottom of that hierarchy. And at this point, I would usually say something about the media, about how people are turning against the media. That's rather unnecessary, as people aren't just turning against the media, they now openly hate the media. The BBC cry that people don't want to participate with their documentaries anymore. Journalists are regularly heckled and shooed away when they turn up at protests or activities. And millions of normal people now dismiss any narrative pushed by the media as lies, and rightly so. I think it's almost impossible, though, to hate the media enough, as they have been possibly the most central component to our racial demise. So with this widespread racial awakening, a growing distrust of the system, and an open hatred for the media, surely we should all be celebrating that victory must be just around the corner. Well, I would love to stand here and tell you all that that was the case. But sadly, it is not. Whilst we should celebrate this mass racial awakening, an open disdain for the anti-white system and the media, we must be honest and acknowledge that we face the worst conditions we have ever faced. The demographic situation in this country is dire. White Britons now make up 70% of the population. And I could stand here giving you all the statistics by age, gender, etc. But I made that speech in Finland earlier this year. I laid out all the facts, and I'm sure many of you have watched that speech, so I'm not going to repeat it. If you haven't, that speech is widely available on various social media platforms and video sharing sites. But there is one statistic I do want to talk about. There is one point about our demographic demise that I wish to go into a little more. Because when I gave my speech in Finland earlier this year, I was working on 2023 figures. And now the ONS have published new figures. And these figures relate to live births in England and Wales. For the year 2024, these are the most up-to-date figures. White British births made up just 51.2% of all births in England and Wales. That's down from 55.6% the previous year. A catastrophic drop. And why is this significant? Well, we stand here in 2025. And this is the year when it is likely that white British births become a minority in maternity wards in England and Wales. And this alarming statistic is coupled with another uncomfortable fact. Births of children to parents where at least one of the couple were born overseas have now risen to 39.5%. We must acknowledge it is not just immigration that is the problem. Of course, the numbers coming in, both legal and illegal, are the worst they've ever been. But we also face a huge dying off of elderly white people. Many white Britons now leave this country every year to go and live abroad in some white British refugee camp in the Costa del Sol. And on top of all of that, birth rates amongst the English, Scottish, and Welsh are now at an all-time low. So despite this great mass racial awakening, we are heading towards minority status at the fastest rate ever. And that rate is accelerating. So those in our circles that are celebrating and telling people that victory is around the corner, they will be disappointed. And those who call themselves leaders, who are out there selling this nonsense to their followers, telling them of this impending victory, they're either naive or they are lying. But talking of this victory, how are we supposed to achieve it? How is this great victory meant to be delivered? Well, Within nationalist circles, there have largely been two schools of thought post-Second World War. And I disagree with both of them. And this is where this speech is going to upset some people, as I am going to address the two different groups, these two different schools of thought within nationalist circles, and I'm going to say why they've got it wrong. Now, the first group of people is, of course, those who think we're going to vote our way out of this mess. They naively believe that we will stand as candidates, tell the public what we think, the public will come to their senses, vote us in, and the next day we're just going to put the immigrants on boats, send them home, and we all live happily ever after. People have been doing this since the 1960s, and every attempt to do it has failed miserably. But not only has it failed miserably, it's cost millions of pounds and countless man-hours. And the high watermark for this electoral let's win by voting approach was the BNP in the 2000s. But how successful was the BNP? Well, we managed to get elected 2 MEPs, 1 London Assembly member, 56 councillors, and 1 county councillor. And that sounds amazing, and it felt amazing back then. But let's be honest, it was a drop in the ocean. And more worryingly, it was a feat that could not be replicated again. For a start, there used to be 72 MEPs. And we won at a European election due to proportional representation. We have now left the EU, that route is closed off, and there is no longer a national election in this country that takes place on the basis of proportional representation. The Greater London Assembly has 25 seats, and you need 5% to get someone elected. We crept across that line in 2008. Think of the demographic shifts that have taken place in London since then. We're now less than 36% of the population in London. We aren't winning in those cities. They are lost to us. And finally, according to Google, there are 18,645 council seats on the mainland. And currently, not a single one of them is occupied by an ethno-nationalist. And at the BNP's height, just 0.3% of them were. It's not a significant figure. But Mark, I hear those wedded to the electoral route cry, this is our time. This is the time when we can really do it. But it's not the case. Not only have we left the EU, not only are there no more large-scale national proportional representation votes, not only have the demographics got worse, but there is also the small issue of the Reform Party and Nigel Farage. Reform is now an electoral juggernaut. At the time of me making this speech, of us being here today, they are the favourites to win the next general election. And they are so big and so heavily associated with the anti-immigration cause that if any ethno-nationalist was to stand against them, they would be easily crushed. At best, it would be a humiliating defeat. And at worst, the few dozen votes the ethno-nationalists took from Reform would stop them getting in and ensure that a Labour Party or Conservative Party candidate did get in, which would be a much worse scenario. Now, does that mean we shouldn't be out campaigning on important issues such as remigration? Of course it doesn't. We should campaign for an end to mass immigration. We should campaign for mass deportations. We should push back against digital ID. And we should be involved in all manner of activism that influences the Reform Party, that influences elected officials that may think like us, and influences voters who may still be clinging on to Labour or the Conservatives. We should be trying to pull the political narrative and parties that have some degree of synergy with us in our direction. And we should be trying to get anyone in power, anyone, whether it's Reform or a rogue MP like Rupert Lowe, into a position where maybe, just maybe, they could slow or even halt our replacement and buy us more time. You see, we might not be able to directly attain power, but it is possible for all of us to have a massive influence on those who can attain power. But let me be absolutely clear with you all. Starting another micro-party with a few hundred members that will stand half a dozen candidates and take 26 votes per seat is an absolute waste of time. And I don't want to hear any nonsense about a 20-year plan. The year is 2025, and we will be a minority by 2050. The number of times I've heard about 20-year plans, and every one of them fizzles out dismally, because they're a pipe dream. People need to understand what happened in the 1920s and 1930s in a foreign, racially homogenous nation under completely different political, social, and economic conditions is not going to be replicated in modern Britain. And remember, before I receive any criticism, I walked that electoral path for a decade, and I saw how easy it was for the system to snuff out a party with 14,500 members. We are not voting our way out of this mess in any conventional sense. But I did say there were two routes that people have put forward for how we attain power. Something that people have talked about post-Second World War, so I'm obviously going to address the second. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the idea of some race war. And the people who put forward this method of attaining power are actually more foolish than the ones who claim we're voting our way out of this mess. The idea that we're going to see a giant racial conflict, some form of European civil war based on race, where white people all rise up and fight for their collective future against some unholy alliance of left-wing activists, LGBT degenerates, and ethnic minorities, has been put forward as a viable solution long before I ever came into nationalist circles. And not only hasn't it happened, but it isn't going to happen. It's a fantasy. And this solution is actually worse than the solution of relying on the public to vote their way out of this mess. And the harsh truth is that for many who claim they subscribe to the idea of a race war, it's actually little more than an excuse for them to do nothing. For the last 25 years, I have been reassured by countless nationalists that whilst they are totally unwilling to do anything productive in the real world, they will of course be there on the front line with us all when the race war breaks out. You know the ones? You've probably seen them. They're grossly overweight, and would technically be completely useless in any form of conflict other than maybe a fight for the last spring roll at the all-you-can-eat buffet. But they want us to believe that when the time comes, they will be there on the front lines doing the business. They won't. It will not happen. It is an excuse to sit on their backsides, not engaging with anything remotely productive. Yes, the racial and inter-ethnic conflict will get worse as the government loses control, thanks to problems created by mass immigration and the natural frictions that arise in a multicultural society. Society will decline, violence will increase, and white people will increasingly be the victims of that violence. But it won't become an all-out war. And to all those who say it will, I have two words for you. South Africa. South Africa still exists. It still just about hobbles on, and it just about functions, despite all the problems it faces. And Britain is still many decades away from being where South Africa is. So the question is, what do I think will happen? Well, I believe we are heading towards a sectarian country, a country that is divided along ethnic, racial, and even political lines. A divided nation, one with Muslim areas, some Sunni and some Shiite, black areas, Hindu areas, Sikh areas. There will be areas for every different ethnic group. The country will fracture, and people will naturally separate. And as this separation takes place, there will be increased violence. Tensions will rise, inter-ethnic conflicts will flare regularly, and different groups will fight each other. They will jostle for a greater position in the hierarchy of our broken, multicultural country. And interestingly, white Britons are finally getting onto this. This year, I went on a family holiday to Cleethorpes. And as we drove home in the evening, after an extremely exhausting day, I was greeted by the most wonderful sight. English and British flags were flying from every lamppost as we drove back home through our small town. And these flags hadn't been put there by me. I was away on holiday. They hadn't been put there by anyone I know. They had been put there by normal, local people who are now sick of things. And I know what the official mouthpieces for the dissident movement will quickly say, that they're just a sign of national pride and just a sign that people are fed up with woke politics. But let's face it, let's be honest, these flags mean something more. They are a sign of the growing ethnic pride amongst white Britons. These flags are a sign that locals are far more than just sick of things. They are a visual marker. They're an example of white people saying, this is our area. This is a British area. This is an English area. And more importantly, that migrants are not welcome. And these flags going up has a historical precedent. It's highly reminiscent of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland was a country split between Catholics and Protestants, and if you took a walk through Northern Ireland at the height of the Troubles, It would only have taken you a moment to realize which area you were in. The different communities flew their own flags, adorned their areas in their own colors, and painted the walls with murals of their heroes. Each community clustered together in their own area and then fought for their own interests. And this is what ethnic minorities in Britain have been doing for years. They have a massive lead on us. They've got the head start. They are ahead of the curve. They have already clustered together. They have already made it clear where their areas are. They have transformed entire towns and cities, flown their own flags from buildings that used to be ours, flown them from the lampposts. They've transformed areas in which they live into places that are visibly foreign to the average white Briton. And if I was to take any of you here today and drive you into a Muslim area, you might not know exactly where you were from a geographic standpoint, but you would know it was a Muslim area. And you might say, well, Mark, of course you would. There'd be Muslims everywhere. But even if the streets were clear, you could tell by the shops, the restaurants, the signs, the flags, the places of worship. It would be obvious. And now, white Britons are doing the same. They are marking their territory and letting others know this is our place. This is the accelerationism I was talking of earlier. It's a huge step forward. And the most important thing is it is normal white Britons out doing this. They're doing it off their own backs. They're going out, teaming up with friends, relatives, co-workers, and just putting up flags. This is the most sure sign we have ever had of an organic mass racial awakening. But it's also a sure sign that we are headed towards a multi-ethnic sectarian society. We are headed towards a divided country, divided by race, religion, ethnicity, but also divided by politics. A factor which will be accelerated by an increasing level of political violence. This year we saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and before his blood was cleared from the crime scene, the left were cheering. The media were platforming people who, well, they weren't openly celebrating, but they were letting the public know that maybe he deserved it. Maybe he had it coming. Maybe, just maybe, people with that point of view don't deserve to live. And remember this, Charlie Kirk was not one of us. He was not an ethno-nationalist. But the people celebrating that man's death believed that he was an ethno-nationalist. And those people would happily see exactly the same fate befall all of us. This sectarian world we are moving towards will not be a peaceful one. Won't be all-out war, but it will be characterized by increasing tensions, both political and ethnic, something which the media will endorse and something the media have promoted for decades. The violence will increase dramatically. So what is the solution? If it's not starting a micro-party and it's not all-out war, what is it? Well, the solution is quite simply the same as what it has always been: community. The last time we saw white community action on a widespread level against the state was back in the days of the Winter of Discontent, when white working class communities stood up against the destruction of British industry, the removal of British jobs, and the dismantling of working class communities. Since then, The reordering of the class system and the attack on white communities has intensified at an unprecedented level. The UK government have done everything in their power to smash white British communities all over the country. Our industry has been taken away, our communities have been left to rot, and our people have been deracinated and taught to hate themselves. And whilst the government have treated white people this way, they have done the very opposite to other ethnic groups, pumping money and resources into homogenous ethnic minority communities, allowing them to grow and flourish. The government has not only helped to create this sectarian society, but it has given a leg up to every other ethnic group. It is clear to anyone with a brain. The government wants them to win. The government wants them to beat us down. The government wants ethnic minorities to have the whip hand over white Britons. And that is because the government fears one thing above all else: an organised, racially aware, ethnocentric white community. And that's why the government is doing everything it can to keep us down. That is why the government helps ethnic minority communities to persecute us. It is why they try to pump our heads full of multiracial propaganda in order to deracinate us. It's why the government has weaponized the justice system to terrorize anyone who dares to speak out against their anti-white policies. And anyone that thinks that this is all a fantasy only needs to listen to Keir Starmer's recent speech at the Labour Party conference. He boldly stated that he was declaring war on anyone who dared to claim that being English or British was tied to an ethnic identity. Well, I can tell you this. They declared war on white Britons a long time ago. For decades, they have been discriminating against us. For decades, they have been bringing in migrants here to replace us. And for decades, they have taught us to hate ourselves and reject any form of in-group preference. And now, Keir Starmer is saying they will go after us if we have the temerity to claim that we even exist. As apparently anyone can wash up on these shores and claim to be English. And if you dare to disagree, you'll be getting a visit from the thought police. And I know when this speech goes up online, I know when this goes up on social media, there will be some people that say, this guy's crazy. He is insane. No, I'm not. I am the most deplatformed, debanked, and banned man in the whole of Europe, maybe the Western world. Earlier this year, I travelled to Sweden and was prevented from entering the country because I was going to deliver a speech calling for Swedes to move to ethnocentric white communities and live together peacefully. The reason I have been kicked off every social media platform, the reason I am even banned on X, the reason I can't have a bank account, and why I'm banned from America, Canada, and 29 other countries, virtually every country in Europe, is because I am one of the very few people who is calling for the only solution that can actually work. I'm not selling you some pie-in-the-sky 20-year plan. And I'm not telling anyone to go out and call for violence. You shouldn't do that. Don't go and do stupid things. Don't do anything illegal. Don't do anything that gives them an excuse to arrest you. Instead, I am saying the one thing that the establishment truly fears. It's simple. White people must stand together. We must divorce ourselves from the anti-white system, and we must create our own ethnocentric communities, built around us, our needs and our desires. Places where we can immerse ourselves in our culture and our traditions. Places where we can express ourselves freely. And most importantly, places where our children are safe. In a world of competing ethnocentric groups ruled over by an anti-white establishment that is invested in shifting both the political narrative and the demographics in the wrong direction, the isolated white individuals who stand alone are destined to either be beaten into line and forced to celebrate their own demise, and if they don't, they will be reduced to nothing more than silent victims. There is only one solution. We stand as one, and we, as proud, strong, white people, go our own way. There can be a bright future, but it will never and can never be in a multiracial society. We are the people who created vast empires, raised up entire civilizations, and whilst others stared at the stars, we reached up and touched them. It's time we used our boundless potential to break free from the system and build something new. We cannot expect to thrive in a place where we are a hated minority and where every law and every rule enacted by the state is geared towards beating us down even further. And we should not be content begging for crumbs from the table either. We are worth far more than the odd scrap thrown our way by the anti-white establishment. And we must do this sooner rather than later. We do not have the time for a fanciful 20-year plan to come into fruition, one which hinges on white liberals and migrants finally starting to vote for our rights and our vision. Nor must we sit idly by, fantasizing over a great conflict that will never come. Because as we sit waiting, stationary, the world around us moves and changes for the worst at an ever-accelerating rate. We need to take our destiny back into our own hands. And the first step is creating a place for us. A place for us to weather the storm. A place where we are put first, not for a special day, a week, or a designated month, but always. A place where we can thrive, where we can express ourselves, and where we can grow. We must build a place that no one will build for us. A place where we can secure an existence for our people and a future for white children.